Okay, so good day to each and every one of you. This will be our first video discussion for the subject Fin 008. This is banking and financial institutions. So without further ado, let's begin with the topic. So I would recommend that you guys will have your copy of modules with you while you watch this video so that you can take down some notes, or kung meron man ako mga sasabihin na mga important na details, you can take it down, and or if you have questions while you watch this video, take down nyo rin yung mga notes yun, or yung questions na yun. Okay, so let's begin. The first topic that we're going to discuss is about the financial system of the Philippines. And during our first meeting natin, we already quite discussed about the financial system of the Philippines. Kung naalala ninyo, 'di ba? Sabi natin, we have the three parts of a financial system, which are the savers, the financial institutions, and borrowers. And then the medium of exchange that we use is whether in the form of money, credit, and finance. If you will look closely here in this diagram in your modules, this clearly states kung ano po yung sinasabi natin or yung tinutukoy natin na financial system sa Pilipinas natin. Didiscuss natin ito that lenders will save up money in financial institutions or financial intermediaries in this case. And then these financial institutions will then also give money to borrowers. And borrowers will now then pay their loans with interest. And this interest will go directly into the financial institutions. And this will be their form of profit. And then in turn, financial institutions will also give interest back to the lenders or to the savers natin. And let's move forward with this kind of information. Let's define further financial institutions. They provide financial services for members and clients, also termed as financial intermediaries because they act as middlemen between the savers and borrowers. So ang pinaka-role po talaga ng mga financial institutions natin is to provide financial service to the members and clients. Whether lender ka man or saver, or ikaw ay borrower or spender, may kinabang kayo if you will avail the services of the financial institutions. And to put it simply, these financial institutions are called banks. Banks then lend money to borrowers to generate revenue and accept deposits. They are typically regulated heavily as they provide market stability and consumer protection. So these banks, if you will look really closely, especially here in the Philippines, most of the banks are privately owned. Hindi naman talaga government ang nagmamandate or yung naghahawak or yung nag-supervise sa mga banks. They are mostly privately owned. So nakakapagtaka, bakit private institutions ang mga may-ari ng mga bangko natin dito sa Pilipinas? And bakit kakaunti lang or siguro iisa lang ang alam ko din na government bank natin? And kung ganun, sino ang nag-supervise sa kanila? Paano nare-regulate siya? If here in this definition it says that they are typically regulated heavily since they provide market stability and consumer protection. Napakalaki ng role ng mga banks natin sa ating economy, sa ating market stability, since they typically they are really involved in the financial system of the Philippines. And as such, having this heavy responsibility ng mga bangko, they should be regulated heavily. Sino ngayon na nagre-regulate sa kanila? We're going to move forward with these kinds of banks. Pero dito muna tayo pupunta ngayon sa, okay, wala pala dito. Sa next chapter pa pala natin pag-uusapan yun. Pero, we will still move forward with the lesson on hand. So, pag-uusapan natin maya-maya lamang kung sino nga ba yung nagre-regulate sa kanila at kung sino yung namamahala, sino yung nag-supervise sa kanila. Para, syempre, since malaki nga ang role ng mga bangko sa atin, they should really be taken seriously, no, and regulated heavily. So we have different kinds of banks that we can different kinds of banks that we should know. We have public banks, commercial banks, central banks, cooperative banks, government-managed cooperative banks, and government-managed land development banks. We will further discuss these types of banks maya-maya lamang sa ating module number 2. Pero let's move forward with the module number 1. Aside from banks as financial institutions, there are actually non-bank financial institutions. Mga hindi naman talaga sila bangko, pero they can also be considered as part of the financial institutions. And these kinds of banks generally, ang pinaka-service na kanilang ino-offer ay more on investments, risk pooling, and market brokering. They generally do not have full banking licenses. Hindi talaga sila considered as banks, pero some of their services are under the services offered of some banks. So ano yung mga non-bank financial institutions na ito? These are finance and loan companies, mga companies na nagbibigay ng mga loans sa mga pera sa atin. Insurance companies also take into this. Yung PruLife UK, Sun Investment, ano pa ba? Hindi ko alam kung ano iba pang insurance companies, pero yun, sila yun. Mutual funds and commodity traders. Finance and loan companies, eto masyado na marami din ang nag-emerge ngayon. Si Home Credit can also be considered as a non-bank financial institutions since they provide loans and services to to their guests. Also yung if you notice, no, yung Bill Ease ba yun? Bill Ease na application, it's also like home service. GCash is also, it can also be a part of this since they are currently offering various financial services like loan, meron na rin sila yung mga credits natin, yung GCredit. Paymaya can also be a part of this, and other forms of hindi naman talaga sila bangko, pero they provide financial services. Next, we will talk about financial markets. Financial markets are markets in which securities, commodities, and fungible items are traded at prices representing supply and demand. What do we mean by these? No? By the way, the term market here typically means the institution of aggregate exchange of possible buyers and sellers of such items. So generally, when we say market here in this time or in this particular topic, ang pinag-usapan natin dito is yung kabuuan na share ng mga buyers and sellers natin. Kung gaano kadami yung number of buyers, kung gaano kadami yung number of sellers, kung sino yung mga pwede nating identify na buyers, kung sino yung mga pwede nating identify na sellers, and so on and so forth. Alright? Okay. Thank you. Now yun, since yun nga yung definition natin ng market, and that will be the definition of the market, of the term market in the future, for future references, no? When we say market, this typically means the all of the information about the buyers and sellers of such items. Mga information about them, like sino ba sila, gaano ba sila kadami, how will you categorize them, buyers and sellers of such, and everything else. Kaya mahalaga din na pag-usapan natin when it comes to business yung ating mga target market, kasi ang target based from the term itself, no, target market, ito yung market na target mong bumili ng mga produkto mo. So first, you have to identify your target market, kung sino nga ba yung mga possible na buyers ng ng product mo, and so on and so forth. Balik tayo dito sa ating topic, financial markets. Ibig sabihin lang po ng financial markets, ito po yung market wherein the trading of securities, commodities, fungible items that represent supply and demand. Generally speaking, ito po yung mga market na wherein we can trade off a lot of stuff that we consider as commodities, we consider as fungible items. When we say fungible items po pala, these are items that typically, paano ko ba i-describe? Fungible items, sila yung wala talagang, hindi mo ma-determine yung kanilang monetary value, pero pwede mo silang ipag-trade off as a form of money, as a form of cash or asset. And you have to first consult other third party na mga tao. Maybe say for example, you should consult an expert on how you will place a value on a specific fungible item before trading it off as a good. For example, nito ay oil, yung ating gas products. Typically, they can be traded off into a different product. Pero first, you have to identify first the value so that alam mo kung ano yung value ng oil na ibebenta mo. Other forms ito is maybe gold. Gold is also considered as a fungible item since typically wala naman talagang halaga yung gold ngayon. I mean, we don't place monetary value when it comes to gold, pero you can put monetary value with it upon the services of a third-party expert. So yun po yung mga fungible items. Now, when we say financial markets, we divide it into two. We have the primary markets, generally refers to the new issues of stocks, bonds, or other financial instruments, primarily divided into two segments, money market and capital market. Ibig sabihin lang po nito, ito yung initial na market na iisipan mo na ito yung initial market na poproblemahin mo. Usually, nagre-refresh ito. Dito lumalabas yung mga bagong issues ng mga stocks, ng mga bonds, and other financial instruments. By the way, to give you a better or simplified idea about financial markets, think of Philippine Stock Exchange. Yan, PSE. That is a form of financial market. Kasi it is a place wherein people can sell off their stuff, whether in a form of security, commodities, and fungible items that will represent supply and demand. So, yan, PSE is a kind of financial market. And when we say primary market, ito po yung initial na market, the fresh batch or the new batch of issues of stocks, bonds, or other financial instruments. And it can be further divided into two segments, the money market and the capital market. Next, we have the secondary markets. Ibig sabihin na naman po nito is ito yung parang previous batch wherein you've already made trades with it. You've already transacted in this market. So, previously issued na siya, hindi siya fresh batch ng market natin. Next, we have here the financial instruments. We already were able to identify financial instruments such as yung money, credit, and finance. Pero let's further identify it. You can divide it into two parts. We have here the cash instruments. Cash instruments are valued directly by markets. They may include securities, loans, and deposits. Ibig sabihin nito, without any consultation from third-party entities, meron na kagad value yung pera na yon. Cash is cash, no? Money is money. Whether it is in a form of physical cash, whether it's in a form of loans, whether it's in a form of deposits, online e-wallets, ganyan, it is considered cash kasi 1 peso is equal to 1 peso. May determined value na siya. Wherein derivative instruments naman po, these are financial instruments that derives its value from one or more underlying entities. Ibig sabihin po, wala pang actual value yung mga derivative instruments natin, and we need an underlying entity to identify the value of our derivative instruments. Usually ito po in it will go as assets, index or interest rates. For example, dito simplify natin, assets natin dito, maybe kung meron man kayong apartment or meron kayong bahay na tinitirhan, this can be considered as a physical asset. And the difference really, no, sa cash instrument natin, tingnan nyo na lang din maigi. When we say cash instrument, 1 peso is equal to 1 peso. We cannot further argue with that, no? Pero when we say derivative instruments such as yung ating bahay, ating lupa, ganyan, you still need to consult a third-party entity bago natin malaman kung magkano nga ba talaga yung value ng ating lupa, kung magkano nga ba talaga yung value ng ating bahay, bago natin malaman o bago natin to i-trade off into whichever product we want, no? Next, we have the financial services. Financial services, ito yung mga usually na ino-offer ng mga financial institutions natin, ng mga bangko natin, services that are offered to their clients. Meron madalas, pwede mo itong gamitin as, yan nga, to save up your money. You can also get your loans from these kinds of institutions, and it is a form of financial service. Other services such as credit unions, credit card companies, insurance companies, stock brokerage, and investment funds. These are all types of businesses, all types of services that can be offered by financial institutions. Punta tayo ngayon sa... I won't really take too long into discussing the history of financial history and nature of the Philippine financial system. Pero gusto ko lang i-reiterate dito before we move forward with module number 2 that we have here the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas and the Securities Exchange Commission o yung SEC natin, and they are the ones who regulate and supervise the banking industry. And we will discuss this further sa next chapter ng ating discussion. Now, generally speaking, module number 1, we talk about the 6 elements of financial system. We have the financial institutions, which are yung mga banks natin, and other non-banking na financial institutions. We have here the financial markets, na-identify natin to kanina, financial instruments, services, financial practice, and financial transactions. So ito po yung 6 elements ng financial system natin. And really, the main objective or the main description of a financial system is the borrowing and lending na sinasabi natin during the first day that we discussed the topic or the subject. Now, we're moving forward with module number 2. Module number 2. This is the overview of Philippine financial system. Now, pag-uusapan natin kung ano nga ba ang meron sa financial system ng ating bansa, ng Pilipinas. We already discussed this, no? The term financial system. Meron na tayo din functions ng mga financial system natin. Then now we're going to discuss this. Philippine financial system. It is, of course, no, our country is primarily run by banks as our financial system rather than capital market based. So instead of us being heavily reliant on capital markets, nagre-rely tayo primarily sa mga banks. And then, the banking sector typically is accounted for more than 80% of the total resources of the financial system of GDP natin way back in 2010. So really, it plays a primary role in the financial intermediation and is the main source of credit in the economy. Our financial system is the one who saves us in term natin, and they really typically run our economy. So basically, how the bank works or how the bank operates, makaka-apekto po sa financial system ng ating bansa. And our financial system, tulad ng sabi natin, is further divided into two. We have the banks or yung mga financial institutions talaga, and we also have yung non-bank financial institutions. Pinag-usapan natin kanina. They can be in the form of lending or loans, yung mga, like say for example, home credit, G-credit, GCash, ganyan. Paymaya, ewan ko kung si Paymaya meron din. Si Shopee, alam ko may Shopee Pay Later na rin siya. Also in a form, it's a form of loan and it's a form of lending at some sort. And then ano pa ba yun? Insurance companies, also a part of the non-bank financial intermediaries. Now, let's move forward to the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, or what we call BSP. It is the central bank of our country. And the short history, you can read it here if you want. Pero what I want to put emphasis here in this definition is this: BSP utilize fiscal and administrative autonomy from the national government in the pursuit of its mandated responsibilities. Ibig sabihin po nito, no? The BSP utilize fiscal and administrative autonomy. This is granted on large bodies of entities like BSP, for example. Ibig sabihin po nito, walang control ang government natin sa BSP. Hindi kontrolado ng government natin ng BSP. Walang kapangyarihan ang ating presidente sa pagkontrol ng Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. Walang kapangyarihan ang ating mga senador, ang ating legislative committee sa pagkontrol or sa pagpapatakbo ng Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, at wala ring kinalaman at wala ring kakayahan ang justice system ng ating bansa sa pagkontrol ng Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. BSP has its own ways of how to do things. And generally, they provide policy directions in the areas of monies, banking, and credit. They really regulate heavily, no? Sila po yung nagpaparegulate ng mga bangko sa atin sa Pilipinas. And kaya natin na magkaroon ng mga privately owned banks here in the Philippines kasi meron tayong government body, or we can call it a government body of some sorts, pero it is a Central Bank of the Philippines, which is yung BSP. And BSP, of course, is not privately owned. It is actually technically not a bank, no? Kasi hindi ka naman pwede ditong I'm not sure if you can deposit money here in Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, if they have credit card services. Pero the main purpose of BSP is really to regulate these banks that we have here in the Philippines. So, ito pong mga privately owned banks sa atin, sinusunod nila kung ano man yung mga policy directions na ginagawa ni BSP in the areas of money, banking, and credit. It supervises operations of banks and exercises regulatory powers over non-bank financial institutions with quasi-banking functions. So, aside from the regulation of the banks, sinusupervise din nila yung mga non-bank financial institutions natin. Like say for example, yung mga different companies na nag-o-offer ng mga loan, nag-o-offer ng credits, nag-o-offer ng insurance of some sorts, and everything else. Now, punta tayo sa different kinds of banking institutions. Akalain nyo yun, no? Meron pala different types of banks. Hindi lang para sila yung parang direkta na, ito, bangko, pare-pares naman sila ng functions. No. Merong iba't ibang klase ng bangko dito sa Pilipinas natin. So, we will define it. First, we have here the commercial banks. Commercial banks, ito po yung usual or madalas natin nakikita dito sa ating bansa. Generally, they accept deposits, make business loans, and offer related services. They also offer a variety of deposit accounts such as checking, savings, and time deposits. These institutions are run to make a profit and owned by a group of individuals. This is what I want to put emphasis when we define commercial banks. Commercial banks are first and foremost built in order to make profit. Yun po talaga ang kanilang intention. So expect that if you will transact on commercial banks, most of the services that they will offer, of course, will have underlying intentions para kumita sila ng pera. Pero typically, ang kanilang services po talaga ay yung kung ano yung typical na ino-offer na services ng bangko natin. Wherein pwede kang gumawa ng savings account, pwede kang mag-deposit ng pera mo, pwede kang magkaroon ng credit card, pwede kang magkaroon ng loan, pwede kang magkaroon ng any forms of deposits that you can make. Commercial banks po 'yon. Whereas when we talk about universal banks are also somewhat the same with commercial banks except they are bigger. Mas malaki yung ino-offer nila na services. Aside from the services offered by commercial banks, they can offer also investment banking and insurance. So, mas malaki sila na kind ng bangko. And universal banks, hindi lahat ng bangko ay pwedeng maging universal bank. Madalas, meron mga binibigay na license dito para sa mga bangko na mag-operate para makapag-operate sila na as a universal bank. So, yun nga, ang universal banks po natin, aside from money deposits, aside from loans, aside from credit cards, they also offer investment and insurance. So yun po yung universal banks natin. Dito sa Pilipinas siguro nowadays yung mga big names na mga bangko sa atin. Madalas nag-o-offer na rin sila or madalas pwede mo silang i-identify as a universal bank. Since BPI now offers investment banking and insurance. Si BDO, meron na rin siyang investment and insurance. Si Security Bank, meron din insurance. And, sino pa ba? Metrobank, di ko sure kung meron. Pero, ang sure lang ako na meron ay BDO and Security Bank. Yun. Pero yun nga, when we say universal banks, these are also commercial banks with additional services na ino-offer nila like investment banking and insurance. Next, we have the thrift banks. Thrift banks dito sa Philippines very rare or madalang lang sila kasi of course we try to avail the services of commercial banks as much as possible since they have a good reputation already when it comes to saving, when it comes to money deposits. Pero ang primary objective po ng thrift banks is to offer loans, generally longer and easier terms, and also the mobilization of mobile savings. So para silang mas maliit lang na klase ng commercial banks. They also provide loans. You can also save up money here in thrift banks. Pero usually mga small scale lang sila. O hindi yung mga panglakihang scale tulad ng commercial banks. Commercial banks kasi businesses can avail the services of commercial banks. Pero thrift banks is more or less offered for individuals, for people, no, na typically who would want a loan that could benefit them sa business man nila or sa bahay or small time savings, ganyan. So yun po. Thrift banks, difference niya sa commercial bank. Commercial banks is typically availed by businesses and other companies, while thrift banks usually are availed by individuals, mga tao, mga people, since thrift banks are focused on mobilization of small time savings and provide loans that has easier terms. Rural banks naman, rural banks are designed to help out specific rural areas. Here in the Philippines, we have so many rural banks. Hindi mo lang sila masyadong makikita dito sa metro kasi Metro Manila is a little bit already urbanized or medyo industrialized na tayo. Pero kung pupunta kayo dun sa mga remote areas natin, kung pupunta kayo sa mga probinsya natin, they have their own rural banks. And rural banks are typically availed by the agriculture sector ng ating Pilipinas. So usually mga farmers ang focus ng mga rural banks natin to give them financial assistance, mga loans para sa mga kailangan nila ng mga resources sa kanilang mga farms and etc. Here in the metro, siguro, ang pinakamalapit natin na pwedeng ihalin tulad sa rural bank is yung land bank. Land bank natin, although they can be considered as a commercial bank na sa ngayon, pero they are classified as special government mandated bank ata tawag dito. Government managed cooperative bank siya. So it's a government managed or special government managed bank yung land bank. Pero same with rural banks, ang primary objective po talaga ng land bank sa atin is to provide assistance to our farmers or to our agriculture sector dito sa Pilipinas natin. Next, we have here the cooperative banks. Cooperative banks, typically it is run by a group of individuals for their mutual benefit. So ito yung siguro yung kumadalas yung makikita sa mga areas natin, yung co-op na sinasabi natin. Yung co-op na sinasabi natin, yun nga, usually run by group of individuals for their own mutual benefits. And yun nga, of course, itong mga co-op na sinasabi natin, they are defined by the International Cooperative Alliance statement na autonomous association of persons united voluntarily to meet their common economic, social, and cultural needs and aspirations through jointly owned and democratically controlled enterprises. Ibig sabihin po nito, tulad nga ng, ewan ko kung may nakaka-experience sa inyo ng mga co-op, no? Pero ako kasi naka-experience na ako ng co-op. And naglagay na rin ako ng pera doon before. Ang co-op po natin ay mga group of individuals na nag-tipon-tipon for their own mutual benefits. And ayun nga, mutual benefits ang nila such as common economic, social, and cultural needs. So with this kind of definition, and yun nga sabi nga dito, no, democratically controlled enterprises, na ibig sabihin cooperative banks or yung mga tatawag natin mga co-op is really run by people with mutual benefits. And ayun nga, pag co-op kasi madalas yun nga, pwede kang magkaroon ng savings account doon, magbibigay ka ng pera, and then yung pera na yun mag-generate ng interest at some point. Pwede kang umutang, pwede kang mag-loan din sa kanila. Pero typically, yun nga, they are controlled by a group of individuals na meron silang mutual benefit. So lahat ng mga regulations na sinusunod ng mga co-op is of course still under the standards of central bank or CSB. So hindi ibig sabihin na group of individuals lang ang nagpapatakbo ng co-op ay pwede na nilang patakbuhin ito according to their needs and wants. They should still follow the regulations mandated by BSP since they are still governed by BSP. So dapat hindi sila lumalayo, or they should follow the standards or the regulations set by Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. Microeconomics here, these are, pwede mo siguro silang sabihin na sila yung mga non-banking na financial institutions natin. Since dito kasi parang naghiwa-hiwalay na yung yung services na ino-offer usually ng isang bangko. Yun nga, nakalagay dito, di ba? Provision of financial services to low-income clients, including consumers and the self-employed, who traditionally lack access to banking and related services. More broadly, it is a movement whose object is a world in which as many poor and near-poor households as possible have permanent access to an appropriate range of high-quality financial services, including not just credit but also savings, insurance, and fund transfers. So microeconomics po, ang primary objective po talaga niya is to help the poor people out of poverty. Ito po talaga yung primary function niya. And of course, microeconomics, ito yung mga nagbibigay ng financial aid sa mga natin, really poor areas of the Philippines. Sila yung nagbibigay ng financial aid. Sila yung nagbibigay ng financial literacy, financial na education sa mga tao na walang access sa information masyado. Sila rin yung tumutulong sa kanila na i-manage yung kanilang mga pera, kung paano nga ba pwede nila itong i-save, paano nila ito pwedeng i-utilize ng mas maayos para gumaan-gaan ang load na hindi nila ng ating mga poverty-driven areas. So yun po ang ating module number 2. And I hope kahit paano meron kayo natutunan sa akin. Madali lang naman din yung mga yung mga modules natin, no? Primarily, wala naman tayong pag-uusapang pera dito. More on definition of terms ang ginagawa natin. And I hope you were able to understand a few things with this video discussion. So that will be it for me. Thank you so much, and I'll see you guys soon. Thank you and take care. Bye.